Hey y'all, I'm Emily, an almost lifelong quilter with a lot of stories to tell. I have loved quilts and talking about them for as long as I can remember, and I'm here to celebrate the tradition of quilting with you. I'm so glad you're joining me this week here at Patchwork Revival. Hey y'all, it's Emily. I'm your host of Patchwork Revival, the podcast where we talk about quilting and how much we love quilting and all things quilting. Today, this is the second episode of 2025. You are finding me in my sewing studio. I actually am going to try to get some work done while I'm recording the podcast. And by work, I mean finger pressing open a bunch of half square triangles. I have a lot right here, and they're part of one of the projects that I want to talk to you about today. The last episode, I wasn't totally happy with my audio, so I've changed a little bit of my setup, and I hope it works better this time. We'll kind of check it out and see. Bear with me. Y'all are amazing. Thank you so much for being here. If you are here, I would encourage you to scroll down to whatever platform you're listening on. Go ahead and subscribe. Like the podcast, leave a review. I would love to hear from you. And I'd just be so grateful for the support. You guys are great. I'm really happy that I've decided to continue with the podcast. And with that, I think that's all the housekeeping stuff that I've got going for now. So let's dive in. What are we talking about today? I wanted to talk about your Sewjo. Right now, it's mid-January when this episode is going to release. And really, when I hit this time of year, a lot of times I'm running on empty. I'm a little burnt out because holidays are tiring in general. And then as creatives, a lot of us tend to overextend ourselves, so to speak, during the holiday rush where we make gifts for people, or we just kind of operate as though there are 65 hours in a day instead of 24. And that really, it really serves no one, but sometimes we get a lot done. And then we feel really proud of ourselves. And then we wake up and realize we haven't slept in like 2 weeks. And a lot of times I feel like whenever I have kind of reached empty, like my tank is empty physically and mentally and emotionally, that's when my creative tank is just gone. So what can we do when we've lost our Sewjo? We can't find it. We don't know where it's gone, and it freaks us out. Because, especially, I mean, I've been quilting for a really long time through a lot of seasons of my life. Um, some of the ones that come to mind are I quilted, as a kid and then in high school and stuff. I know, super cool. I was like a middle schooler and a high schooler that was like quilting. But I did extracurriculars. I was very serious academically about my studies, and so it's not like I just had a whole ton of time. Um I continued to sew in undergrad, but mostly throughout. Once I got into medical school, it really became sort of a meditative self-care process for me almost. Quilting and sewing was. And I think it was around that time that I really became aware of just how important it was for my own like sanity and remaining centered and grounded. So the practice of quilting really became something that I started actively and intentionally nurturing when I was probably in my early to mid 20s. So I was sewing throughout medical school, residency, when I got my first job. All these are very stressful things. And all of these are things that I vividly remember hitting a point where I just wasn't really doing a whole lot as far as creativity goes. And I look back on that and I realize it's probably because I just had to prioritize basic physical needs like a lot of times the choice was, do you want to eat, shower, sleep? You can pick two of those three things. And sewing was just not on the radar. But throughout the years, I've also had two children while I was working full time. And that's a similar thing. And I think a lot of us can relate to either feeling overworked, overwhelmed by family stuff, work stuff, or everything in between, or all of the above. So I think one of the first things that I want to just point out is how important it is to recognize why you're creating. Like, why are you doing this? And if you can sort of step back and think to yourself, okay, well, the reason that I want to sit down and quilt, or the reason that I feel so grounded and centered when I sit down to quilt is because it's a time that I am using my hands in a repetitive, meditative way. And it's a time that I feel grounded, centered, relaxed, meditative. Okay, if that's the case, then give yourself a little grace on those times whenever you're burnt out and exhausted and tired because your kid's been awake all night, or you just had a baby and you can barely do anything, much less like shower. Um, it's okay to have times in your life when your sewing practice might not be as vibrant as you're used to it being, or even that you want it to be. There are, of course, people who sew and make quilts and things of that sort for work. And I mean, I can't really say that I have a lot of advice for those situations, although I have a job that's very demanding. And some days work is just work, man. You just show up, put your nose to the grindstone, do your best, and just work to get the heck out of there. And that's okay. Like, that is okay. Maybe, you have a deadline and you're trying to get something done, even just, as a hobby quilter. Oh, somebody's birthday was next week and you were trying to finish this quilt and you've been like burning the midnight oil, burning the candle from both ends. You finally finish and you're ready to move on to that next project that you had in mind. And then you're just like, "Ugh, I don't want to set foot in my sewing space. I don't want to set foot in my studio." And moments like that can be a little bit disconcerting. But I think that just accepting that this is a normal part of creativity, it waxes, it wanes, it comes, it goes. It's just kind of a naturally cyclical thing. So when it's here, accept it. When it's gone, just kind of accept it, maybe expect it almost, and give yourself a little grace because usually, like I say, unless you're quilting to like put food on the table, um, it's okay to take a couple days off or to like not do that project you envisioned or whatever the case may be. Now, I will say in my life, quilting is a way for me to sort of process everything that's going on around me, the good, the bad, the ugly, the scary, the pretty, the fun. It makes me find time to reflect on what I'm grateful for. Um, gives me a little time basically by myself alone. As an introvert, because I am introverted and I have to have some time to like recharge and re-energize basically. So there are times when I'm like kind of noticing that if I've neglected, you know, the parts of my creative practice, like sitting down and sewing or something like that, because I've needed to catch up on sleep, or I've needed to clean the house, or I've needed to give my kids attention because they're sick, or I just have felt pretty bad myself and, basically had to hibernate through the first trimester of my pregnancy. I do notice a nag. I start feeling a little nag that's like, boy, you sure do seem crabby. Boy, you sure could use some time to yourself. Why are you being like this? And a lot of times it's because I'll recognize, oh, I'm getting a little anxious. I'm getting a little kind of pent up and burnt out on not having had time with myself because I haven't been in my sewing room. I haven't been sewing. I haven't been quilting. And so a lot of times in those situations, I kind of experience the other side of the coin where I'm like, okay, Emily, you have got to figure out how to make some time for yourself to do what you love. And for me, that's quilting, amongst other things, but um, we're talking about quilting here. So we'll go with that. So, in those moments, it can be really daunting to step into your studio and think, okay, well, I've got to get my attitude straight. So I've got to get in here and find something to do. But I just don't know. Like my creativity is dried up, or I don't have fabric for something or whatever. That brings me to telling you about this project I'm working on right now. So, what I'm working on right now is a very basic quilt idea that I had. It was inspired by a photo that I found of my grandmother and then my dad and his sisters and his brother when they were younger. And they're all spread out having a picnic on a quilt that was all made of like scrappy half square triangles. And it's a black and white photo, so I don't really know what that quilt looks like. I don't think anybody specifically remembers that quilt, but I know my mama's style, and I felt like I could almost visualize that quilt. And so a while back, I decided, wow, I want to make that, but I'm going to put my own spin on it. Like I'm going to use some 1930s reproduction fabrics that I have that I bought a long time ago when I first started quilting, and then kind of got them because I knew, like, I don't know, my grandma uses fabric like that. So I guess I can use fabric like that. But obviously, my style has evolved over time. If you follow my work, then you know I really like a lot of neutral colors, not these like primary happy go lucky colors that are in 1930s reproduction fabrics. I sew a lot with wovens, stripes, stuff like that. So I decided to pair these really bright, happy, scrappy 1930s repro fabrics with a neutral stripe and then some Kona ice peach that I have, along with like a vintage orange, like a dreamsicle almost colored gingham. So I had to put some of my grandmother's fabric in there. That's where the gingham comes from, because it's a quilt that honors her and my memories of her. So, um, I basically have made this as a scrap quilt. So it's 2 at a time, half square triangles. I make 16 of each pairing and then I sew them in a row of 4x4. It's a lot of just prep work, marking your diagonal lines, just chain piecing them through your machine, trimming HSTs. When they're just individual half square triangles like this, I just finger press them open. That's what I'm doing now, actually, as I'm sitting here talking about this. But all this to say, this is a very foundational, fundamental, sit down and just do stuff. Like get your hands busy, get your hands moving kind of project. I probably started this, oh my gosh, 9 to 10 months ago. I mean, it could even be a year. I can't remember. But the bottom line is it's so basic that I can put it away and pull it out and know right what I need to do. It's not like some super complicated project where I'm like following a pattern, having to label 1,000 pieces. Then I get back and I'm like, oh, what was I doing? Where was I? Because I have some projects like that I've put away and I don't know how I'm ever going to get back into them. That's almost more daunting than it was to start a project. So having something just really basic and fundamental like this has been really great for me, um, because it's almost like it's just muscle memory. It's just an exercise. It just gets me out here in a place and a mentality where I can kind of think straight and I can meditate. I can listen to my podcast. I can listen to my music and just chill, just enjoy life a little bit, enjoy my time to recharge. And then inevitably, that will make me feel inspired to do something, to start a pattern or um, maybe jot down some design ideas or start talking to myself, put myself on camera. I clipped my microphone. Actually, today, I clipped my microphone to my rotary cutter that's sitting in my little, um, like ceramic jar that I have some of my other notions in, like my little snips and scissors and seam ripper and stuff. So, anyway, I just decided I'd get to talking while I was doing this and talk about finding your Sewjo again. So, kind of going through the motions whenever you're physically ready and able to do that is a way to kind of get your body moving in such a way that your mind starts gearing up and remembering, oh, yeah, I really like doing this stuff. What do I want to do next? And I think if you try that, you'll probably find it'll do something for you. Another thing that I have done in the past is uh, just tried something new. Um, One thing that I did, now I can't even remember, sometime last year, I think it was in August, perhaps. Um, I actually I did something I had never done, and I signed up for a class at my local quilt shop because they were hosting a class on foundation paper piecing. And I was like, well, I don't really know how to do that. It'd be kind of cool to learn. Like I could watch on YouTube, but it might be fun, to spend like a Saturday morning just kind of getting out of the house, going and doing something. And then also my friend Bree was going. Y'all have met Bree on the podcast before. And so I don't know, it was kind of like peer pressure. I was like, okay, well, I've talked to Bree and she's really enjoyed going to these classes. She's hosted classes before to help teach people how to sew. So I was like, I'm going to see what this class thing is all about. And I went and there were 7 or 8 of us. Um, Bree and I knew each other. 2 other ladies knew each other. And the rest of us were just all total strangers that acted like we had known each other forever. We were all different skill levels. Um, it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. And I learned a new skill. And by kind of learning a new skill, in my mind, I started getting ideas about how I wanted to incorporate it into my practice. So for me, I have always loved this kind of vintage, um, brown, red colored pineapple quilt from the Sandra Bullock and Ryan Reynolds movie, The Proposal. It's hilarious in that movie. It's a comedy, okay? And they call that blanket, like the grandmother gives them that blanket and she calls it the baby maker blanket. And as funny as that is, it's like a beautiful quilt. But I was like, man, I don't know if I could ever really do that as like a string quilt. But you know what you can do? You can foundation paper piece a pretty killer vintage pineapple block. And so I was like, man, I feel like I totally have that skill under my belt. I feel like that is a project that I could kind of start and have going in the background, just like this half square triangle project, so that, when the moment strikes, I can come out and get some work done on it, even if it's just a couple minutes or even if I'm just going through the motions. So that was one way that I was a little bit surprised at how inspired it made me feel. Um, Sort of the other thing that I alluded to a little bit in telling that story was being in community, like physically in community, rubbing shoulders with other quilters of all different skill levels, um, all different backgrounds, all different perspectives. You know, scrolling on Instagram is really fun because you see new fabrics, new colors, new patterns, new ideas, constant inspiration. But it's really different when you see somebody in real life and they like have their work and their fabrics in real life, and you can talk to them about it and they can talk to you about your stuff, and it sort of helps you remember that anytime you're being creative, like in this case making a quilt, it's always about more than the quilts. It's about the community, the connection, the legacy that you're building, and the people that you meet along the way. And that totally can be a virtual thing. I get it. But I would really encourage you to find a group or make a group. If you live in a cool place, like, I don't know, I have so many friends in like, this is going to sound ridiculous because I know this is like a whole state, but I have so many friends in like Wisconsin and Minneapolis and stuff that I'm like, dude, if I lived there, I would drive like 45 minutes once a month to meet with people. Um, if I had to create a group, that being said, a lot of bigger places have really cool like guilds or clubs. Clubs are different than guilds. I think guilds have to follow particular guidelines in order to be acknowledged as a guild, and you have to pay a certain amount of dues, maybe. I don't know. I should probably look into that. Maybe we'll do an episode on what actually is a quilt guild. I'm not a member of a quilt guild. I'm a member of a quilt club. And actually, I'm in a pretty small town, Texas. There's no interstate running through where I am. We're less than a couple 100,000 people here, but there's an amazing quilt club full of all different kinds of people. Literally, like 40 to 50 people meet on the second Monday in the evening of every month. And we just, you know, s- at the end of the year, they have a planning meeting where people volunteer to do presentations on different topics that they feel um, compelled to give presentations on. So there's always a presentation. There's always something called the opportunity table, where people can drop off old fabric, old notions, thread, like old magazines and things that they don't really use anymore. And sometimes that can be a really cool place to get some inspiration because you're like, oh man, I've been looking for a red fabric and there's one right there for you and it's free. You just take it. It's amazing. I'm sure at a guild, I mean, this is kind of my assumption, they bring speakers in and things. So you're going to see someone presenting something about quilting or creativity. That could totally inspire you. Another thing that may inspire you is the show and tell. Like, people bring their own show and tells of projects that they've done. I remember one time this member of our quilt club brought a quilt top that she got from a teacher, like an estate sale of an old former teacher that she had. And it was this incredible, like 1970s, I think, vintage Tree of Life quilt top. I'm going to tell you, I still think about that thing. That's another one I'm going to make. Okay. So I've got that. I've got that in my mind too. So inspiration will strike you, but sometimes you're going to have to go out and try to find it a little bit. And going to your local meeting, quilt clubs, community, I think is such a great way to do that. Try your best not to be intimidated. A lot of quilters are introverted, y'all. It's not just you. Also, nobody cares as much about you as you do. So just go out, put yourself out there, meet somebody, man. Um, I promise you that like the stereotypical little old lady quilter is probably just as intimidated of you if you're like a young person. I mean, I'm 37 almost, so a lot of times I'm one of the younger people in the group, but like I'm friends with all of them and I love talking to them. I love seeing what they're doing. I love that I make all these like super traditional quilt designs and then someone who's like 50 years older than me, okay, that's an exaggeration. I forget how old I am. Maybe 30 to 40 years older than me makes these like incredibly beautiful modern quilt designs. So, anyway, inspiration abounds, but sometimes you got to get out of your sewing room to go find it. That's the bottom line. Another thing I want to point out, and I'm guilty of this, okay? But Instagram, Pinterest, like social media and things like that, even YouTube, let's be honest, scrolling, seeing things is so fun. Like it's so fun. It's addicting. Like studies have shown you get this like dopamine release in your brain from the kind of content that you consume on social media. Um, and I love it. I love feeling like I know what my friends, like virtual friends are working on. I love seeing new fabrics because when you see colors and patterns, you get really inspired by things. And that's the word, inspiration. You're inspired. But you're really not being creative unless you're converting that inspiration into something. Like we spend so much time consuming things like inspiration that we just waste our time. And I don't want to sound um, like mean or judgmental, but that's how I feel about myself. I'm like, you know what? Put the phone down. Like, just put the phone down. Go get out of your house and like just go make something for Pete's sake. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be uh documented. There's no pressure for you to spend time posting anything ever that you make. Um, so who cares? What if it's hideous? I don't know. It doesn't matter. What really matters is your why. Circling back to the beginning of the episode. What really matters is like, why are you doing this? Is it to have a perfectly curated Instagram feed, or is it to calm your mind down, to have your hands busy, to feel accomplished, to feel like you've done something, to produce something beautiful like art and put it out into the world? That's why I'm doing this. And a lot of times, let's be honest, I'm doing this because it keeps my brain uh, kind of focused and centered and healthy. And that is important. So, creating over consuming is an act that really does feel like a resistance to our society and our culture. It's so counterintuitive because we're like, oh, wow, look how beautiful that is. I would love to make a quilt like that. Oh, I love that pattern. I would love to make that. Okay, so buy it and go make it. Like get off the scrolling, get out of your feed and go make it. Um that's a hard thing, but my relationship, I'm an elder millennial. My relationship with technology over the past couple of years, especially since I've had children, has been evolving and changing, and I'm much less inclined to um, live my life through a screen. That goes both ways with scrolling, and capturing and documenting. So, those are my thoughts. I would love to hear what you guys think. I listen to a lot of podcasts about creativity, actually. And a lot of times people are like, oh, just don't force it. Just step away, take a walk, do something different. I'm going to be honest. I never find that that stuff works very well for me. And, obviously at the end of the day, what works for me may not work for you, but those are some ideas that I have about finding your Sewjo, reclaiming your Sewjo, um, getting some of that creative inspiration, getting those creative juices flowing, finding your creative energy, and just sitting down, getting to work. If you have any other ideas, I would love for you to message me. Hop on Instagram at Patchwork Revival Studios. That's where you'll find me, as well as everything else about the podcast and um, my sewing. I do still document some things, even though it's not my favorite thing to do. Um, that is also a cyclical part of my life, so it is what it is. But you can find me there. I would love to hear from you. I would also love if you would scroll on down on whatever platform you're currently listening to and subscribe to the Patchwork Revival podcast. That way you'll never miss an episode and you'll be supporting the podcast, which would make me so happy, and I would be so honored if you would choose to do that. Thank y'all for being here. Leave a review if you would like. I would love to know what I'm doing right. I'd also love to know what I could be doing better. And the only way I know that is by getting reviews from you. The other thing to keep in mind is that anytime you rate or review or subscribe to the podcast, you're helping send messages out into the world that say, "We like this podcast, keep it coming." And so it'll be presented to people differently, like more frequently on their feed. And that'll help the podcast grow, which would be amazing. Anyway, I hope that this episode has helped you sort of find some focus, kind of get some ideas on how to find your Sewjo if it's been lost over the holidays. Remember, there's no pressure, and it's always about more than just the quilt that you're making. So have fun, be kind to yourself. I can't wait to see you guys next time. Bye, y'all.